Welcome back. Now that you've got your footage, let's take a look at Premiere, a QuickTime-based, non-linear editing software released in 1991. If you've been taking notes as recommended in Take 1, you will know that non-linear editing allows you to edit the video without altering the original footage. In brief, this software allows you to make multiple corrections to any footage gathered, all without risking damage to the original. The very first thing to consider when you put all of your footage together is color. Without proper, consistent color across the final product, shots will feel inconsistent, no matter the content or effects added.
Just like you, I'm a little confused on filmography too. Sometimes it can feel like a million steps in one just to get a few minutes of video. Sometimes though, we should talk to a professional. Maybe someone else could help us with that. What do you think?
Hey, welcome to a video on the functions of color correction. For that, we have an entire subfolder dedicated to color correction. You'll be looking for Lumetri Color, which is right in the middle of these effects. You'll want to hold click on that, then drag it over to your clip. Before we start applying edits, it's good to know that there's an ideal place to begin corrections. A hero shot is a clip that has the best colors and definition of your footage. Take this shot for example. Compared to other shots, this one is slightly overexposed, and this one doesn't have the right framing, whereas our first one has everything exactly where we need it. You can use edits applied to this clip as the basis for all other clips, giving you an easy-to-use starting point for your editing. Now, before we move on, let's talk about the goal of color correction. When editing, you want to start with making the color space of the video as close to real life as possible. Bringing the correct saturation, contrast, and definition to a shot gives you more room to work with when adding visual effects. It also makes some of the effects we're about to apply a whole lot easier to use. We'll start by moving to the Lumetri Color effect and clicking on Basic Corrections. The first option is the LUT, or the lookup table. This feature allows you to apply a pre-made color space to a video. An input LUT can also be called a technical LUT. This means that it is meant to make an image appear normal, meaning it converts the image to look more similar to its real-life counterpart, as well as making it easier to apply other effects. As we start applying these edits, you'll notice that it changes the scene drastically. This isn't what we're going for. LUTs are meant to work only with a specific recording style. Manufacturers usually release their cameras alongside an input LUT that can be used to normalize the video. The only way these can be affected is through their intensity, with 0 being the least and 100 being the most. Now that we have a good understanding of these, let's move on to the first option in the color panel, that being white balance. For this effect, the only thing you need is the eyedropper. Clicking on that changes your mouse to an eyedropper. From there, click on the part of the shot that is meant to be white, and the effect will automatically make the selected piece white, along with adjusting the color of the rest of the shot. For better accuracy, you can hold Ctrl and Command and then click on a section of the video. This is because it expands the sample area to a 5x5 pixel sample. This allows for more accuracy as a larger sample is taken. Next, we'll take a look at temperature. Temperature is affected in values of negative to positive. By decreasing the number, it causes the image to appear colder, adding a blue overtone. Increasing the number adds an orange overtone, making the image appear warmer. Tint is underneath that, and functions similarly. The farther negative you go on the slider, the more green is applied over the image overall. The same can be said for pink, as you increase the number, the more pink is applied over the scene. After that, we have saturation. This controls the colors. By moving it to 0, all colors are muted, but by increasing this number, all colors are intensified. The light drop-down menu has a variety of effects, but we're going to want to focus on these bottom two, the blacks and the whites. For the whites, these adjust the cutoff for white values, causing any pixel brighter than the threshold to be limited. By increasing that number, we increase the brightness and vice versa. With the blacks, these adjust the cutoff for black values, causing any pixel under the threshold to be limited. A negative value causes the scene to appear darker, whereas a positive value causes the image to appear lighter. Exposure adjusts the overall brightness or darkness of a shot, with a positive number increasing the brightness and a negative number decreasing it. Contrast is underneath that, and controls the difference of light and dark pixels. By increasing the value, the difference is amplified. And by decreasing the value, the pixels become closer to each other's values. After that, we have highlights. This controls the brightness of pixels in the range of whites from the previous edit. A positive number indicates a higher value of white than before, and a negative a lower value. Next is shadows. These control the darkness of pixels in the range of black from the previous edit, with a higher value causing black pixels to appear brighter, and vice versa. After applying these, we can move on to the Creative panel. When we open it, the first thing we'll see is the Look panel at the top of the list of effects. This can also be called a Creative LUT, and these are applied after the shot is balanced and prepped, and are meant to change the color's depth and, well, the look of the shot. These, unlike technical LUTs, are meant to drastically change the scene. From here, we can select SL Blue Cold, and this will apply a blue overtone to the image. Notice how the colors we highlighted and amplified before are now more present in the scene than before. The edits applied helped us more precisely and accurately apply the effect. This can only be changed through its intensity as well, similar to a technical LUT. From here, we'll look at the Adjustments drop-down panel. For faded film, black values are raised, and white values are lowered, causing the image to appear duller. Sharpness is after that, and functions by focusing on blurry pixels and increasing the contrast between those and neighboring pixels. A lower value will make the image appear foggier, and a higher number making the image appear sharper. Next, we have Vibrance. This adjusts the saturation of the picture, but avoids saturated pixels and skin tones, leaving the original colors of the scene intact. By decreasing that value, the colors of a scene will remain muted, whereas the original saturated colors will retain their original color. By increasing that number, the saturation will increase, but the original saturated colors will keep their original color and saturation, for the most part. Saturation is next, and similar to the basic corrections panel, intensifies color exactly the same. With that out of the way, we can close this and open up the Curves panel. This first effect, RGB Curves, lets you adjust the intensity of white, red, green, and blue in a certain range of colors. When looking at the graph below, you can think of the x-axis as luminosity, or in simpler words, the brightness of a color. The darkest area is represented on the left, and the brightest on the right. For the y-axis, we can look at this as the intensity of the color. By clicking on a point in the line, you can create a point that can be moved up or down. The line, however, will adjust itself to follow whichever points you place, so remember to adjust accordingly. Below that is the hue versus sat curve. This allows you to change the saturation of specific colors. By moving it up and down, we can increase or decrease the saturation of the color respectively. This can allow you to correct an oversaturated portion of a shot without affecting the surrounding color. Next is the hue versus hue curve. This allows you to change the hue of a chosen color to another hue. Notice how I can change the red of the cup to any color I want. This can allow you to replace colors without altering the rest of the scene. It functions similar to the curve before. Next is the hue versus luma curve. This allows you to change the brightness of specific colors. This also functions the same as the lapse graph. By moving the dot lower, we decrease the brightness, and vice versa. The luma versus sat curve allows you to change the saturation of a shot based on the luminosity. This lets you brighten darker areas of a shot without altering brighter portions of a shot. Notice that by decreasing this value, we can see some of the midtones become grayed. Last but not least, the sat versus sat curve allows you to change the saturation of a shot based on the saturation already present. By choosing a portion of the shot already well saturated, we can decrease that number and see similarly saturated areas on the cup gray out. By increasing this value, we can see the similarly saturated areas oversaturated. Now let's look at the color wheels and match panel. One of the most helpful functions on here is the comparison view. This allows you to compare the shot you are currently editing to other shots from your footage, giving you an idea of what changes should be made and their effects on the footage. With our edited video on the right, we can look at the previous video on the left, and notice that the cup's saturation has definitely changed. In the next comparison, we'll see that the colors changed drastically, with the left side being a lot oranger and the right side having more of a yellowish tint overall. With that in mind, we can head over to these next three circles. They represent the shadows, midtones, and highlights of the image. These represent the darkest, middle range, and brightest values of the shot. By clicking on the color circles, we can apply a variety of color overlays in these separate areas. This slider adjusts the brightness of the color applied. By increasing that, the brightness of the color overlay is increased, and by decreasing it, it decreases the brightness of the color overlay. By applying a blue in the highlight section, we can see that the color is similar to the previous shot we'd seen before with the comparison view. With that out of the way, let's keep moving. HSL secondaries might be a little bit complicated for the time being, so we'll drop that for now and move on to vignette. By adjusting the amount, we can either apply a lightening or darkening ring around your footage. After that, we have midpoint. By decreasing this number, the effect begins closer to the center of the video. By increasing it, it expands outwards. Roundness adjusts the roundness of the effect, with a higher number causing the image to appear rounder and a lower number causing it to wrap around the aspect ratio of the shot. Lastly, feather adjusts the blending of the inner side of the effect. Now that we're done demonstrating, I'll take a second to correct the video without having to demonstrate. Alright, so for this image, we can see that the color has been more properly balanced and the white balance is a lot cleaner. On top of that, we can see that there's a lot more definition in the colors without it being too overwhelming. While the red cup in the center has kept its original color, the rest of the scene has been saturated to match. That's about it for Lumetri Color. While there are other effects in the Corrections tab, they're either self-explanatory or they require a good understanding of how they work. For now, Lumetri Color will give you access to everything you need to correct color like a real filmographer. Thanks for watching.